So it's been a while since I did my first impressions on the April dripper, but today I wanted to give you guys my final thoughts and my preferred brewing technique with this dripper. So let's get right into it. If you guys are new here, my name is Vincent and I'm the head roaster for Taylo's Coffee. And if you love educational and experimental videos, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you can get the latest updates on my newest techniques. Now in the first video, I actually talked about how I thought that it was kind of an interesting design. It was pretty much a Kalita wave, but plastic, green, and it's got the one hole at the bottom instead of the three. Also, a unique point on it is that it's not a flat bottom like the Kalita. It actually has a divot, but it has these three triangular points that kind of hold it and make it quote unquote flat. So what that does is it allows this dripper to have a lot faster of a flow rate, less clogging, and it creates a brighter and sweeter cup of coffee. At least that's what I think the designers were intending. Now, flat bottoms I've always had a problem with because when we normally brew like our 20 gram to 300 grams of water kind of ratio, there's actually not a lot of bed density. So it's not a very thick thing. So that means when I pour water into it, the water kind of drips out relatively quickly, which means I have a very thin flavor profile from the beginning. So the solution to that is to actually be using it to brew larger batch coffees. And that's actually what I think flat bottoms were really intended for in the first place. If you look at all like the commercial drippers, they're all like commercial machines. They're all really flat bottoms, none of them are conical. And the reason behind that is it creates a more even extraction, but the bed density is also much thinner than if it were to be in a conical. So you get a much better flow rate and you get a much better extraction rate. So we're gonna be brewing a larger cup of coffee on it. So onto the filters themselves, I'm actually gonna be using the Kalita wave filters instead of the April filters. I couldn't find them within Canada for a reasonable price. So yeah, easy. The April dripper filters are actually very similar. They're also based off of a wave system. So essentially we'll be brewing with something very similar. I was explaining how the density works. Now into the filter. The filter, as you can tell, have waves, and these edges or ridges actually catch a lot of the coffee grinds as we're brewing it. So when we're brewing, we fill it up and some of the coffee grounds actually get trapped in the edges. So what the solution is to actually do what I call the flush, or what you guys might know as the flush. It's when you pour water down the top of the rim and it flushes all the larger grinds down. So that's a solution I like to use. You can also use swirling as a solution, but in this, because of the ridges, the water when you're pouring doesn't actually have a great flow rate. So in conical brewers, because they don't have these ridges, when you're pouring down the side or whatever it is, you can actually create a motion with your pour alone. I find that quite difficult to achieve with the waves, and so we're not going to be doing that. So the technique itself is very simple. Because of the limitations of both the flat bottom and this, we're going to be brewing a larger batch without much directional movement in our pours. So the pour technique we will be looking at is to not create too much agitation. So what that means is, because in a larger batch size, you're gonna have more likelihood of clogging. Clogging is gonna be when you have a low and slow drain rate towards the end where all the beans have sank and all the water is on top. And I find that starts to draw out a lot of the more dry flavors that leave this dryness aftertaste in your mouth. And I personally don't like it. I don't know about you guys, but dryness in my mouth, not good for me. So the solution is to have a faster brew time and less clogging. And how we do that is actually to have less agitation. And this is very important, especially because we're brewing a larger batch. What we're looking for is to have a longer first drip timer. That's why we're gonna be using 30 grams of beans. It's nice and thick. I'll show you guys in a sec. And when we pour itself, we're gonna be pouring down the middle and mostly staying down the middle. You're gonna wait till all the grinds have floated to the top, and then you're gonna move to the edges. Because of how large the batch is, there's enough time for the water just moving down the middle to create enough agitation to push all the grinds down. Now, if you are brewing with a much darker roast, you could do a blue. Yeah, that's crazy, but you could do a blue. And when you bloom, you just kind of want to look to saturate all the grinds really quickly. Because you're using more coffee beans, it's actually easier to create a bloom without losing too much water. So you just kind of get everything all wet, and then you just do the same thing. We just pour down the middle all the way to the top, and then we give it a quick stir. If you want, because there's going to be some coffee grounds at the edges, what we're going to do at the end is we're still going to work our way to the edges at the very end and just flush it. So in the technique itself, I'm going to be using 30 grams of beans and 450 grams of water. We're literally just going to pour to the 420 mark nice and slow, and then we're going to use the last 30 grams to work our way to the edges and do the flush. So this is how I brew with the April Dripper itself.
Are you seriously watching this video all by yourself, trying to learn how to make better coffee? Well, you know, the first step to making better coffee is to have better coffee. Make sure to get the single pour coffee, because you know, I can tell you're single. Anyways, visit teoscoffee.com and use code NOHOSE for 15% off.
So as much as I said that the brewing technique could work for any kind of bean, it's still nice to know what you're gonna be brewing with. So today I've actually got a new coffee that we're about to release. It's gonna be called Daylight, and it's an Ethiopian coffee that's a red honey process. And this bean itself is roasted on a medium level. It doesn't have that much gas. When I pour with a V60, I actually only do one round towards the edges, so you can tell that there's not gonna be too much agitation necessary. So that's why in the middle of this, because it's gonna sink a little bit quicker, you're going to want to pour a little bit faster in the middle of the brew. We're gonna start nice and slow, we're gonna speed up in the middle, we're gonna do a flush and then let it finish, okay? If you really wanted to, you can actually do the flush a little bit earlier and get back into the middle, but that causes a little bit more agitation. With a coffee like this, it's doable, but I'm not gonna do it. I'm just gonna show you guys the simplest method. Straight down the middle, nice and slow, but we speed it up only because this bean sinks a little bit quicker. And we do a quick flush and finish the brew. Now, just before we get into the demo, let's quickly talk about the recipe in a little bit more in depth. We're gonna be using April Dripper, we've got the filter, we've got our beans, but we're gonna be grinding the beans at about 400 to 450 microns. This is actually the same grind size as a normal pour over that I do it on, or with my V60s. That's because the April itself, it's a flat bottom. You kind of want to have a finer grind. And with a single pour technique, you're actually going to have a much faster draw time. And so you want to be extracting everything as quickly as possible. We're going to be using 30 grams of beans and 450 grams of water. So it's a 1:15 ratio, but with a little bit more beans than we normally use it. And because this bean is on the medium to like lighter side, we're going to be using higher water temperature, looking to be using a 95 degrees. Let's get right into it. So here I have everything set up already, but I'm gonna show you guys how I set my grinds. As always, you want to stir the grinds. The act of oops, that's awkward. But the act of stirring itself is just merely to break up all the clumping. So you don't want any clumping, okay? We get to the middle, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna tap a couple of times. I tap a little bit more times, 4 times today, because I want to create a higher density so that the water takes more time to pass through. This allows us to have a longer first drip. And I'm gonna show you guys that. When we pour, we're gonna pour straight and only from the middle. Nice and slow, nice and even, consistent flow. And as it starts to work its way out, you wanna just kind of slow yourself down so that it has a bit more time to go through. Now, the first drips have just kind of started to come out. It's about 18 to 20 seconds, and that's a pretty good time. It means we have had a bit of time to kind of extract some of the flavors and move out. Now, with some of the other coffees, like even for this one, what you can do is you can actually move to the edges right now and break the crust. But I'm just gonna show you guys a simple version that works for a little bit, for everything. And we're just gonna pour down the middle. And the gases inside will naturally break the crust on its own. The more water you pour, the flatter the line gets because it just starts to fill itself back up. And so that's the premise of this technique. It's pretty easy. You're just gonna pour down and we're gonna start to speed up. And as we speed up, we add a little bit more agitation to break everything. You can see the sides just filling up as opposed to the middle. And you wanna speed up a lot more now just because you wanna get to that 400 mark. And then you're gonna start slowly work your way to the edges, break everything, pop that crust, get back into the middle, and we're gonna give it a quick stir. And once we're done stirring, you just want to lift it up and give it a quick tap. That tap's gonna let you settle everything, and the last remaining bit will have to flow through a little bit more of the coffee, which creates more flavor, more texture, and more depth. And this is how I brew my April. And as you guys can see, everything has sank. That's because the water, you can tell once the crema kind of moves away from the sides, you know the grinds have already sank. So it's settled nicely already, and it's a pretty quick brew for 450 grams. So you can see, pretty good bed, nice and flat, give it a quick tap. Make sure you get all the loose water out. And that's a wrap, we're done. Now let's get back to the other side and talk about this brew. So we're back to this side. This is our finished brew. It's actually quite a dark color, which means we have a pretty good extraction from it. There is a lot of coffee. This was a 1:15 with 400 grams of water, 450, sorry. But yeah, let's give it a quick taste. So when I was actually testing it, yeah, nice and rich. The single pour technique actually seemed to have worked really well with this. You could probably get a little bit more sweetness if you poured a little bit slower, and if you poured with a more vertical kettle. The kettle I'm using is that's the Bonavita one. It's got a pretty long spout, and it's more from a higher point. If you wanted an even tastier cup of coffee, I would recommend going with the Buono kettles from Hario, or using the Time Wars. The Time War ones actually have a very, very sharp drop on their spout, so when you're pouring, it's actually a very, very vertical spout. This would actually allow you to have a much more vertical pour and allows the water to kind of just hit everything much more evenly. What I could have done is because of this coffee, is poured a little bit slower in the beginning to create less of a mushroom cloud, or to break the mushroom cloud a little bit earlier. I just wanted to show you guys a very simple technique that can work for many different kinds of coffee. But because this one still has a bit more gases, you could break the crust a little bit earlier than if you were to be working with some that are like the super light Nordic roasts that even I love to drink. I have a new coffee that's coming in, by the way, that would fit that, and it is ideal with a single pour. It's nice and light, and when you pour with it, you can just do a really quick pour down the middle and you won't have such a big mushroom cloud. But yeah, the taste itself is very compact, it's very flavorful, even with such a simple pouring technique as just pouring down the middle. It's because when we're pouring down the middle and we have a compact, denser amount of coffee grinds, we're able to push and flush all the sides. And then once we've lifted all towards the sides, we're gonna have a nice, rich and round flavor profile. So I'm very happy with this brew. Hope you guys like it as well. So thanks for watching, everybody. This is my kind of take on the April Dripper itself. I'm still not a big fan, don't really like flat bottoms. That's my personal take though. And that was a simple recipe that I used for a lot of different beans, and it worked really well for them. So that's it. If you guys like this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up, and catch you guys in the next one. Bye.